next couple of weeks of Elul, we're going to be going through some of the pieces of our Maczhor. It's hard to choose new things because last year I taught this class and I taught the highlights of the Maczhor. And the highlights are just the highlights, right? They're the big pieces that we come to every year that are important to sort of study and think about and lead us into the Chagim. Mostly having to do with themes of teshuvah, of returning and repentance, and that's what this season is all about. But I wanted to start a little bit differently than we started last year. And so today we're going to look at the Hineni prayer. The Hineni, before I say anything, I just want to play it for you. And luckily, I have to share. Luckily, because of last year's productions, I have myself doing the Hineni prayer, so I don't have to show you somebody random from YouTube. Hold on for 1 second. Let's see. Oh, that's not the right one. 1 second. To bring back some memories for some of you.
Yeah.
Seems to be running a little slow this morning.
Elohei Avraham.
34.
Our service continues on page 140 with the Hineni. Rabbi Russell will be saying those words, "Here I am," the words spoken by Abraham when he was called to by God. She will be standing in for us. Unfortunately, we are not here. You are at home. But she's going to be standing in as the Shaliach Tzibor, as our community representative before God on this day. We can't all be here, and we certainly can't all carry a tune like Rabbi Russell. But we can, wherever we are, answer that call on this day, the day on which the book of life is open to all of us.
הענייה ממעש נרשת ונפחדת מפחד יושב תילו ישראל באתי לעמוד ולהתחנן לפניך על עמך ישראל אשר שלחוני אף על פי שאיני חדאית והגונה לכך לכן אבקש ממך אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב אלוהי שרה אלוהי Rivka Elohei Rachel Velohei Leah. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun, Elohei Yisrael, Shaddai Ayon Venora. Heina Matzliach, Darchi Asher Ani Holechet, La'amod Ulvakesh, Rachamim Alai, Va'al Shochai. Ki ata shomea Tefilat Amcha Yisrael berachamim. Baruch Ata Shomea Tefilah.
Okay, so I hope that gets you in the high holiday mood a little bit. Sort of ending in that high holiday nusach. We can all sort of feel like we're back in the sanctuary and feel the modes of the high holidays, which is the point of the season and is the point of that. What does that bring up for you, the Hineni? What memories, the melody or the sort of the tone or the feeling? You know, what do you think of when you think of the Hineni prayer? Any experiences that you've had either when you were younger or more recently? Feel free to just jump in. Marty.
First of all, that was so beautiful, and I think of you.
Thanks.
And then, sorry, we have a plumber here, Mike. He's now done.
It's okay.
But anyway, I think of my grandfather who used to say it many, many, many years ago for his congregation. Thank
Was
you.
he a cantor? Was he a
He was
cantor, or
not
he
a
was
cantor.
not a cantor? Just prayer leader.
No, but he
Great,
would-
thank you.
Chosen to do that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Ernie.
Well, I think that the way that at Beth Shalom we have modified it with the Chazan coming from above and coming down the stairs, because in most synagogues, it's the Chazan comes from the back of the synagogue, and you don't really see them because, well, there are too many other people between you and the Chazan. But I think that was started during a rabbi from Canada. What was it? Rabbi
Glazer.
I think he started it, and it's wonderful because it was Alan Liu who wanted the bima in the center, down below, not above the congregation. And by adapting that to have the Chazan come from above and enter into the center of the congregation, it's a very moving experience because everybody sees you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you sort of have that experience of right at the end, right at the end of the silent Amidah, the rabbi or the Chazan, whoever's chanting the Hineni kind of disappears, right? And then you don't know where he or she's going to come from. In our sanctuary, that's less true because you're sort of you're still being seen. Iren.
When you sing the Hineni, or when the prayer is sung, it almost feel like Shaliach Tzibur, you make us feel like we are here, ready to approach the holiday. So
Yeah, so that word of Hineni, of here I am, it's not just about me, right, the person who's singing it. but and leading it and praying it, but also about sort of inviting in the congregation to be ready to say the Amidah, to say the Musaf Amidah. One thing that I wanted to note about the melody is at the top of my page in my Maczhor. If I ever lost this Maczhor, we'd have a really big problem. Like all my notes from, the last however many years are in this Maczhor, and little slips of paper of little melodies that I do here and there. In any case, at the top of the Hineni prayer, I have in quotation marks El Male. And for me, that's a reminder that the Nusach, the tone of it is the same as the El Male prayer, which is kind of, and then what you hear is kind of this yada da yada na na, right? This whole minor tone all the way through the beginning, but then at the very end, na 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 na, right? We go back into the big minor. I don't even know what you call it, but it's a big kind of ending, full ending, which you're going to go into the Amidah with, and I think that is really speaks volumes to the tone and to the themes of this prayer, which is that there's fear, there's awe. We'll look at it very but we'll look at it closely word for word to see what the themes and the words are in there. But there's this sort of starting in humility in a way, and then ending in a big way, in a big sort of high holiday mode, to let us know that we're heading into the Amidah. And then the Amidah takes a lot of different melodies throughout. So there's some high holiday, there's some minor, it's kind of a mix, some melodies, right? Like ya na 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 na, you might remember, right? Something sort of more joyful. But the fact that it starts in that El Male mode, it's called the Ahava Rabbah mode, if you want to get into the Nusach, but you start in that minor key and then you end really, really big. And I think that there's something about that that sort of speaks to what we're actually saying. So I'm going to share my screen a little bit and get into some of these themes. The first thing I wanted to just highlight is the season that we're in, right? So in the Mishnah, this is a group of Mishnah studying people. A lot of you who have studied Mishnah with me, in Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, which is one of the tractates, it says at 4 times the world is judged. So in 4 times during the year, on Pesach for the crops, right? We know that this around Pesach is a time when we start to have our crops judged, like whether or not they've grown, right? It's an important time. On Shavuot is when we start to harvest the fruits. And on Rosh Hashanah, all the world passes before him, God, like sheep, as it says, God that fashioneth the hearts of them all, that considereth all their doings. And on Sukkot, they are judged for the water. So on Rosh Hashanah, it says that essentially we're judged for everyone is judged, right? The commentators even say Jews and non-Jews, right? This is a time of the year that everybody is judged. And the entire world is this image of passing by the one who herds sheep, right? Like that we're all sort of just passing by God in some way. We pass by the ark, right? There's this sort of, we're walking past, and this is our moment of judgment. And this is what the whole year, this whole time of the season, right? The whole month of Elul and up through Rosh Hashanah and then Yom Kippur, that's what this is all about. If you can imagine this slow walk, last year, when we were unable to be together, Rabbi Ain and I were sort of bouncing ideas. How are we going to do this? How are we going to invite people in? And at the end, obviously you all know that we weren't able to invite anybody in, but one idea that we had was just to open the sanctuary and just to let people walk past the ark, right? To just walk, sort of do that walk past, because sort of how meaningful it can be to be in this space and to sort of take that walk past of judgment. I don't know if people actually feel that way when the ark is opened, but that's, we talk about Passover, you're supposed to feel like you were in Egypt, right? On Rosh Hashanah, you're supposed to feel as if you're sort of walking through your year and coming upon this moment of judgment. And so this is the Mishnah that sort of roots us in that tradition. And then of course, lots of traditions about Teshuvah and things like that come in other texts. So what about this word Hineni? The first question one might ask is, what makes us say the word Hineni, right? What makes us respond, here I am? And the question, one would think, or at least the commentators offer us, the question that might make you answer Hineni is, where are you, right? Where are you? Abraham, for example, Hineni, here I am. So God called out to man. This is in the very first chapter of, the third chapter, but the very first parsha in Genesis, where God calls out to Adam, and Adam said, and he says, Eicha, right? And Adam does not answer Hineni. Maybe you knew that. Adam actually says, well, I was nervous and I had to hide, right? He doesn't actually say Hineni. He says, I felt a little bit nervous. This was after they had not done some good things in the Garden of Eden, right? And he was naked and he hid behind something. So God called out Eicha, and Adam responds, I'm hiding, right? And the commentators say here, where are you? The question, God knew where Adam was, right? The idea is that God knew, but God was calling out to Adam and asking Adam, where are you? And Adam didn't have the chutzpah to respond. He didn't have the chutzpah to say, oh, God, I'm over here. He said, oh, I hid, right? And so Hineni, you'll see in a moment, is sort of like, it is identifying oneself, but it's also calling out that one is ready, right? So Adam was not able to say those words. The commentators say that the response God might have been looking for was Hineni, but instead Adam didn't say that. Adam said, I'm not able to come out right now. And we'll see with Abraham, right? Also, sorry, the commentating also here talks about Cain and Abel, right? Where God also says to Cain, where's your brother? And Cain doesn't say, here he is, right? Because he wasn't able to answer that question. And instead he says, am I my brother's keeper, right? He kind of answers in, again, like a little bit of chutzpah, like he doesn't want to actually say where he is, though we know God knows where he is. This is kind of an invitation to open up conversation and to engage these characters. And here's the moment of Hineni that I think most attribute this prayer and this word to. Sometime afterward, this is right before the Akedah, God put Abraham to the test, it says. He said to him, Abraham. So all he did was say his name. He didn't say, Abraham, where are you? Or any of that. He's just said, Abraham, and Abraham answered, Hineni, right? Here I am. And then we know he said, take your son, your favorite one, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point you to. And then a whole bunch of the story happens, which I didn't put in here in our page, but we know that Abraham sort of carries through with it, right? He drags Isaac up to the mountain and he's ready to do it. And Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. And the angel of God called out to him, Abraham, Abraham. So this time he says it twice. He really wants to get his attention. He doesn't say stop. He just says, Abraham, right? And Abraham answers, Hineni. And so here's what the commentators have to say about Hineni. Here I am. Such is the answer of the pious. It is an expression of meekness and readiness. That's one commentary. God said to him, this introductory call by God was to prepare Abraham that God would ask him to do something difficult. Abraham understood this, and this is why he said, I am ready for whatever you are going to tell me to do. So then there's sort of the sense of coming in front of God and being ready in whatever that means, right? Ready for the test, ready for the task, ready in our sense to pray. And then the last piece, Abraham answered Hineni to show that he was prepared to listen. So not only prepared to act, but also to prepare to listen. And I think that we can take, all of those pieces when we think about the Hineni prayer. Any thoughts up until now about Hineni, about preparedness or readiness? Yeah, Irene.
So it seems like when you say Hineni, sometimes it's to be quiet and withdraw. It's not always to act. Meaning by that, when God calls on Abraham twice, he wants him to listen, not to do the act. So
yes,
like Hineni doesn't necessarily, okay, I'm ready to go. It may also mean, oh, I'm ready to sit still at this point.
Great. So in this particular story, I think that in some ways Hineni can take on two meanings. So at the beginning, it seems that perhaps he's ready, right? God calls out to Abraham and Abraham says, Hineni, I'm ready for whatever you're going to present me with. And then he presents him with something quite awful, right? Take your only son and take him up to the mountain to sacrifice him. And Abraham's about to carry it out, or so that's at least how the story is presented. Of course, a lot of commentators say that God never was going to actually let him do that, right? There's all kinds of commentary behind it, but the way that the story presents itself is that Abraham takes his son up, and then God calls out with some sort of an urgency. And then, Irene, what you're saying is it's not I'm ready, but maybe I'm ready to listen, or what is the true test, or what was I really brought here for, right? And that's kind of the second hineni of being ready to listen and ready to see what God has to say next, I guess. Catherine.
I know, but I think it's the irony of the hineni. What it's really saying is, I'm not ready. I'm not perfect. I'm not, the best representative, but the moment's come and we need to go forward,
That's great. Right. So we'll see, in Rabbi Lou's book, and I brought a clip, a section of it for the end of the class, but that's the whole book, right? I'm completely unprepared. The idea is actually that admitting that sort of unpreparedness is what allows you to then get to that hineni moment of saying, I don't know what's coming next. I don't know what the world is going to offer me. You'll see at the actual hineni prayer, the prayer leader says, I'm not really worthy of doing this act for the whole congregation, but I'm the best we've got. So give me a chance, that kind of thing. And right, there's an idea of unpreparedness actually that kind of is hidden or is undertone of the readiness. Yeah, Sonia.
I think it's also about vulnerability. It's definitely admitting unreadiness, but also accepting the vulnerability that might allow for repentance and spiritual growth and the kind of emotional kind of movement that we are all seeking during the high holidays.
Yeah, great. And I think, I think that's what makes this prayer so interesting, because really the custom is that only one person says it. Now, obviously I or the leader says it on behalf of the congregation. But it really is, hineni, the vulnerability that you're talking about, the readiness, the unpreparedness, like all of that is the month of Elul and is the 10 days of tshuva, right? Between Rosh Hashanah. That's the whole point of it, is to be able to say hineni and however that means. Like, I'm showing up and I'm here and this is who I am. And actually it's not in our liturgy other than right here, other than for the prayer leader to say on behalf of the community. Now the idea, if those of you who have a Maczhor, you can see the commentary, but I'll read it. But basically it says, in the Middle Ages, most people didn't have their own prayer books. We've talked about that a lot in the Mishnah class, where there was a prayer leader. And the reason that the prayer leader had to be so sort of diligent and masterful of the words was because you were saying the prayer on behalf of everybody else. And even more so on the Hagim, like on the holidays, people, maybe you knew the daily prayers, right? You knew the weekday prayers, you knew the Shabbat prayers, but something like the hineni that comes up only once a year, people didn't know it. The intricacies of the Amidah and the additions and things like that, they really counted on the prayer leader. And so the prayer leader had to come before everybody and say, hineni, thank you for trusting me. And we'll see, more what the prayer actually has to say. Anybody else? Any other comments? Yeah, Sonia.
I was wondering if you could briefly talk about the history of the liturgy and the placement in the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur liturgy, how it came to be, and roughly where the prayer originated.
So the Maczhor comes from a lot of different places. So the Maczhor comes from the Siddur, right? There's so much of the Maczhor that's in our weekday and Shabbat liturgy, and that has been compiled over from the Mishnah, from the Talmud, from all kinds of different sources. This particular prayer, actually, the hineni, there's reference to it even in the Talmud. So we'll see. I can actually show. I think what we'll do is go through the prayer first, and then I can show you how it mirrors. But the bulk of this prayer, this idea of the prayer leader having to be have a nice voice, and to be, that uses the word ragil, and be very diligent about the words. A lot of that is actually from the Talmud, and pieces of it were taken, and then it was written. Honestly, we don't know the authorship of a lot of these pieces, but they were taken from ancient pieces of text and then kind of made into liturgy along the way. Any other thoughts? Hineni? All right, we'll go into the prayer itself. Oh, sorry, I have one more text. So here, actually, we have hineni from another one of our biblical characters, from Moses, right? Where Moses comes upon this bush, and he calls out to God and he says, God, the bush is on the bush or the tree is on fire, but it's not consumed, right? It's burning, but it's not actually burning down. And this was a sign that God was there, right? God was in this place. And again, God calls out to the character, at this point, Moses, twice. And Moses answers, so like this idea of urgency again, Moses, right? And Moses answers, Hineni. Now, interestingly, the commentators talk about this. So a lot of biblical characters have said Hineni. Almost all of them have had sort of this pivotal moment in their life where they've been able to say Hineni to God in some form. I didn't pull all of them, but if you Google, if you look Hineni, you'll get like every single biblical character will have said it at some point. But here was the next one. And this commentator said, he translates it as I am at your disposal, which is kind of another twist or another way to think about this word Hineni. God responded that though you showed your preparedness with the same word as your forefather Abraham, when I called upon him to offer his son, this is not what I've come to ask of you. And so what this commentator said and what others have said about the other times in the Bible is that Abraham was really the moment. So like all the other characters, they say Hineni. But when we think about Hineni, when we think about this preparedness, when we think about the readiness or the willingness to listen, or all the things that we've already talked about this morning, when we think about all of those different pieces that kind of that represent the word Hineni, the person who we're supposed to think about and the event and the experience that we're supposed to really have in our minds is Abraham and the Akedah. Like that kind of seriousness that God asks a father to take his son up and to sacrifice him, that is the kind of Hineni that we're looking for. And he says here, yeah, Moses, you said it too, and there's other places, other people say it too, but what we're really talking about in the liturgy of the High Holidays, what we're talking about in Hineni when we talk about that prayer is the instance with Abraham. That's what we're supposed to be remembering. And so now, yeah, Irene.
Where does that word Hineni comes from? I mean, the root looks like H and
it's like you were reading the next page. So here it is, Hineni. Can you see that right at the top?
Yes.
So Hineni is essentially Hine Ani. Here plus Ani, here I am.
Okay.
Now, our Maczhor translates it as behold. Hine also can be like behold, but it more like it really means here. Here I'm standing. So I'm going to read it in English. I have it here in Hebrew for all of you to follow along. And we're going to go through the whole thing. And you can stop with questions or we can go back, however works best. Behold, I stand here, Hineni, impoverished in good deeds, perturbed and frightened, in fear of God, who is enthroned upon the praises of Israel. I have come to stand and to plead before you on behalf of your people, Israel, who have appointed me their messenger, even though I am not worthy or qualified for the task. I therefore beseech you, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Yaakov, and then in our Maczhor, God of Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel, and Leah. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun. Adonai, Almighty, compassionate and gracious, God of Israel. Shaddai, Ayon v'Norah, eminent and awesome. Please, Hinei na Matzliach, help me succeed in this mission. So again, this is all on behalf, the prayer leader is saying this on behalf of everybody else, which I have undertaken. To stand before you, to seek mercy for myself and for those who have appointed me. Do not hold them responsible for my sins. Do not condemn them for my iniquities, as I am a sinner and a transgressor. Through my transgressions, may they not be ashamed of me, nor may I be ashamed of them. I'll pause. Ernie, do you want to ask now? Go ahead.
Yeah, why do we use the word Shaddai for God?
It's a great question. So there's
what's the origin of that?
Well, there's a lot of words. There's a lot of different names for God. Shaddai being one of them, and again, like whoever sort of wrote this, it's not a poem. Whoever wrote this prayer was really sort of just taking all of there's a lot of different names of word. Like we say the one who we fear, or ayon is also, a word that we use for God. Rock is a word that we use for God. Makom is a word that we use for God. And so this is just one of those, one of the many words that we use for God. You'll see in a second, it's going to say, I am what I am, right? Which is another way that we refer to God, is like because we don't really know what or who or where God is, people along the way have tried to put names on God, and there's all different ones. V'kabel tefilati, accept my prayer as the prayer of one who is mature and experienced in prayer, ragil, and as one who is respected. This is interesting, whose beard is full grown. We do not have that in our Maczhor anymore. We've taken that part out because we know that prayer leaders can be either male or female. Even in the male, you'll see in the Maczhor, it looks like this. There's one side is for the female and one is for the male. And even in the male, it does not mention a full grown beard anymore, whose voice is pleasant. Goodbye, have a great day. Do you want to say hello? No, okay, goodbye, have a great day. No. And who's pleasing to his fellow man. Rebuke Satan, that he not accuse me, and may our assembling be acceptable to you with love. You take her. Okay. All our troubles and afflictions, please turn them for us and all of Israel into happiness and joy, life and peace. May they love truth and peace, and may there be no impediment in my prayer. And may it be your will, Adonai, God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the Almighty, the great, the powerful, the awesome, most high, Almighty, who is known by the name, this is where I was referring to before, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am. May all who bring my prayers to the presence of your glorious throne and spread them to you, for the sake of all those who are righteous, pious, pure, and upright, for the sake of your glorious name, which is great and awesome, for you hear the prayers for your people Israel with compassion. Baruch atah shomea tefillah, blessed are you who hears prayer. Thoughts?
Lots of sequencing of words to describe God.
Great. Yes, lots of different ways to describe, to think about God. Why might that be?
You wonder, because God is God. You don't need all these attributes.
Right. Maybe you don't need them all. Yeah, Betsy?
Because each of us will respond to a different way of relating to God, and some will want the God of strength, and some will want a different kind of relationship. I'm sorry about that. So I think it gives us all the opportunity to find that place that we connect.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that's my thought as well, right? Like, why do we have all these different names for God? Because there isn't one. And I think you said that different people respond to different names. And I think that each of us can even respond differently in different moments of life, right? If we're in mourning, we might feel differently about God than if we're celebrating a simcha, or if we're in a pandemic, we might feel differently about God than when we're, living what one might call normally. Sort of different points in your life, there are different ways that we respond to and relate to God. And the person who wrote this prayer sort of tapped into that a little bit and was able to give us different ways to access. Great. Other thoughts? Yeah, Susan.
I just think the I am what I am describes all the names that there are available for us. And it is so, as humans, we are not able to even comprehend what God is. So the many names, I think, kind of help in our understanding in our own way.
Yeah, great. So the names kind of help with that accessibility, or even just to try to figure out what that relationship is, or what God is. What about thoughts about the prayer leader? You know, this idea that the prayer leader has to have a nice voice, or look a certain way, or sort of be diligent in the Hebrew. I'm just curious what people think about that. That whether that matters. Yeah, Betsy.
I think to me it does. I first of all know that, you know, when there was traditional Chazanut and let's say male Chazanut, the power of the Chazanut could go into my kishkis, and I didn't know what the words were, and I wasn't necessarily reading them, but the tone and the sincerity and the plaintiveness of this melody makes me understand that, I mean, I know I'm doing my own praying all day, but someone else is representing me who I can put faith in, has really prepared themselves physically and spiritually. We have a friend who used to lead High Holy Day services at Hillel at Cornell for many years. And like, you know, for like a month or two, he went into training basically because he wasn't a chazan, but he had a beautiful voice and he was very knowledgeable. And he, you know, I can imagine that if I had been in that room, I would have felt very similar. I don't think it's just giving authority to the people who are the clergy, but I think, and it's like what Marty said about her grandfather, when someone, or Tom Hertz, when he did this thing he used to do, which I miss every year on Rosh Hashanah, the emotional quality that was brought out by his intensity had everything to do with how I responded to the thing. If somebody just read it, it wouldn't get me. And when it's not done the way I'm used to hearing it, it doesn't get me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Iren.
I
You're
feel
good.
turned off when I sense that the leader is not compassionate.
Mm.
It has a touch of arrogance. It's like, I just cannot connect. Just like Betsy said, I cannot connect.
Yeah, so you can sort of sense that from the prayer leader, and it's important. That makes a difference. Great,
Yeah.
Jackie.
I was just going to add, I think there are also different places in Jewish life with ritual when we look up to the person who is doing a particular job, whether it's a shomer or someone engaged after someone passes away and cleaning the body, you know, engaged in that, whether it's going to the mikveh, whoever the mikveh lady is. Excuse me. We ascribe certain things to a person that has a certain role. And those people can also be lay leaders. They don't necessarily have to have a particular job, but we hold them in a certain position because they kind of model, they clear themselves or some way so they can model certain things that are important in those moments. And I think the same is true of the person who leads this prayer, whether that's a clergy person or a member of the congregation. We put some stock into them to model that for us. And part of that is showcasing the traits that I think both Betsy and Avren were just talking about. But again, we do it in other parts of Jewish life too, I think, just in different ways. Right.
So there is a sense of modeling. And I think that's important to bring forward, because if you take the sort of just the essence of what this prayer is for, you know, from reading the commentary, it's essentially because other people don't know the prayer, right? Or know the Amidah that we're about to pray. And so we put in a prayer leader in their place in order to guide them through the prayers, or even to say it for them in some way. And that idea can feel a bit antiquated. Not to say that everybody here and everybody in our congregation knows every word of every prayer, but we try anyway to have a sort of more participatory service where people can sing along and know the words and sort of be able to participate and to join in. And so that Hineni prayer can feel a bit like not relevant anymore, because I'm not praying on your behalf, you're praying on your own behalf, right? And actually, even the next, when you turn the page to go into the Amidah, the line that we say every time we say the Amidah, Adonai Sfatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha, God, open up my lips, ready me to pray, that's still there, right? So it's not as if the Hineni prayer was to say, I'm praying for you and you don't have to do anything, right? You're just standing there. There is this sort of partnership in a way, that there is a prayer leader to guide, but that we're all still, Adonai Sfatai Tiftach, God, open my own, you know, personal prayer lips, right? Ready myself. There is still an obligation of yourself to engage in this. I saw another hand, but I think it went to Dara. Did you have something to say?
Oops. Yeah, just sort of echoing what other people were saying and touching on the question of arrogance. I mean, I think a very important phrase in this whole litany about the beautiful voice and saying the prayers correctly is that the person saying the Hineni is asking to be regarded as if I have a beautiful voice, as if I am respected, as if, and so that person is, not claiming those things for him or herself, but to say, let's imagine that I am a paragon and, but I'm not saying that I am. In fact, I'm not, but let's just imagine that in a perfect world as if I were. So
great. And even more so, right? The speaker, the person who wrote this prayer on behalf of the prayer leader says, I'm not clear of my sins, right? Clearly I'm a human and I'm just as, sinful as everybody else in the room. But I've been chosen. And so don't sort of judge them on my behalf because I'm not perfect. It's interesting that you sort of said about the voice, being an aspiration. I think it might be a little bit stronger than that, but it is a good question, right? Of how important is that, and how much do we value it says na'im, like the pleasantness of the way that it's sung. Iren.
It's nice to have the knowledge as a leader, but you also have to have, between quotes, the bedside manner.
Great. Yeah. So you have to have, it's not just about pleasant voice. You also have to sort of not have the ego and be compassionate and be a good person also. That's great. And just so you know, I mean, there's tons of halacha even from the Mishnah, from other places in our halachic codes, Jewish law, that talks about what is a shaliach tzibor, like what are the qualities that a shaliach tzibor has to have, not only for the high holidays, but all the time in prayer. And there is a sort of humility, and there's the humility and the pieces that you're talking about, Iren, about character. And then there's also the knowledge of Hebrew and the voice and all of this. And there's a lot of conversation about, can you have a prayer leader? Can somebody lead the prayers if they don't have those things, right? And I think in the times that we're talking about here, the simple answer was no, because they didn't have a siddur, right? So if they didn't know the prayers by heart and they weren't able to sort of do them fluently, they were not called up. But remember, we talked even in the Mishnah about if somebody makes a mistake, how do we deal with somebody who makes a mistake in the prayer? Well, we kind of quietly push them to the side and then we bring somebody else in that's different, right? But there was an emphasis on really getting the words right and really knowing what you were doing before going into that. I wanted to just jump over to just briefly to show a little bit about where this comes from. You can see sort of echoes of some of the language. This is in Ta'anit. This is in the Talmud. It says the Mishnah teaches they stood for prayer and the congregation appoints an elder. It's the word zaken that we saw in the Hineni prayer. That's somebody who's mature, somebody who knows these words, has said them many times. The sages taught in a baraita, in a teaching, that they stood for prayer. And even if there is a man who's an elderly and a scholar, they appoint him to descend before the ark as a prayer leader, only a person who is accustomed in prayer. So it's not necessarily only about your maturity or your age, but if there was somebody there who really knew the prayer, that you would appoint that person. Who is considered an accustomed prayer leader in the sense? Rabbi Yehuda says one who has financially dependent children, but he does not have the means to support them, and he has no choice but to toil in the field, and whose house is empty, and who will therefore pray for rain with great devotion, right? Again, this sort of idea of being devoted to prayer. You're laughing, right? About how your children are out into the world. Those of you who are prayer leaders might be having thoughts about this. Yeah, Sonia, did you want to say something?
The need for motivation in the prayer leader.
What'd you say?
The need for motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
Pray with great fervor, right?
That's right. Rabbi Yehuda continues with this depiction of the worthy prayer leader. His youth was becoming, and he's humble and accepted by the people, right? So now we're talking a little bit more about, looks perhaps, right? Appearance. And furthermore, he must be familiar with songs and his voice pleasant. And he is an expert in reading the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. He knows how to study Midrash, Halacha, and Agadah, right? He's well-versed in all these texts. And finally, he must be an expert in all of the blessings. Clearly, it is hard to find someone with all of these qualities. And the Gemara relates that when this worthy person was described, those sages turned their eyes toward Rabbi Yitzchak ben Ami, who possessed all of these virtues, right? So they're even saying it's hard to find somebody who can do all of those things, who's well-versed, right? And part of the Hineni prayer is actually saying, I think, right? Like, I'm the best that we have, and give me a chance, and don't fault the congregation for the person that's come forward. So I think as we look at this prayer, all the time, it's said by one person, and there isn't really, there aren't melodies in here that we join together, right? Like the Amidah and other places where you're encouraged to sing. In fact, you're really just encouraged to listen. But I do think that the themes of this prayer, the idea of the Hineni, is something that we all should be sort of holding on to in this season, which is why I wanted to start with this, right? That the idea of the Hineni prayer itself and the prayer leader saying, okay, I'm ready, is actually the prayer leader saying it on behalf of the entire community. And in order for the prayer leader to be sort of genuine in that, right, the community has to come along. The community has to do that work as well, so that when we reach that moment of Hineni, we're all able to say it with some sort of genuine nature, and really be able to say it with truth. I wanted to. Are there any other thoughts before I move on? I wanted to just end with a modern rendition of this Hineni, which is by a friend of mine, Rabbi Josh Roshowski, who you all know well. And he actually just wrote this, I think, in the past year, but recorded it recently. And as we listen to that, I wanted to just bring these points from Rabbi Lou's book. And he says what I mentioned before, which is the whole point of Hineni is actually the unpreparedness, right? What Catherine was saying before, that the whole point of saying, here I am, is actually the unpreparedness is what you're supposed to be focusing on in the season, so that hopefully by the time we get to the moment of Hineni, we've done sort of that introspective work and thought about sort of what we're coming with, what we're bringing towards our prayer in the season. So I'm going to play the Hineni and allow you to sort of listen, but also just look through some of these questions that Rabbi Lou presents us with in this book. Can you hear? No. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, because I didn't share. Sorry about that. Hold on a second.
Hineni ani mimas nirash venifchad mi ani bati lamod ulhitchanen lefanecha afal pi sheini chedai ve'agun lecha. Lachen avakesh mimcha Adona mechila bochen levavot shomea tefila golei amukot ayom venora Shaddai תהיינה מצליח דרכי וקבל תפילתי כי תפילת צדיק וזכאי עם כל נעים ופרקו נאה ומעורב בדעת עם כל הבריות על ענת אבשיהם בחטאותיי ואל תחייבם בעוונותיי ואל יהי שום מכשול בתפילתי כי חוטא ופושע אני באתי לעמוד ולהתחנן לפניך אף על פי שאיני חדאי והגון לך לכן אבקש ממך אדון המחילה בוחן לבבות שומע תפילה גולה עמוקות היום ונורא שדי כי אתה שומע תפילה ורוצה בתשובה ברוך אתה שומע תפילה
All right, everybody.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really a beautiful piece. You know, you can hear that
Where?
he repeats phrases,
Where?
right?
Can we get that somewhere?
Sure, yeah, it's just on YouTube. Here, I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so he, takes artistic liberties and repeats phrases. Marcia, did you have something to say?
When I hear that and it's beautiful.
That's
it's
not the
really
right-
beautiful. But spiritually, to me, that's a performance. It's like going to a concert. And I think that having one person and only one person with humility chant the Hineni. Yes, the person has to have a pleasant voice because if they have a really dissonant voice, then that's going to be distracting. They don't have to be spectacular, but it can't be dissonant.
Mhm.
But to have, when we start having, this is for me only.
Oh, someone clicked on it. Somebody clicked on my link. It's not me. Hold on a second. Okay, Marcia, unmute yourself so I can hear you. I muted whoever clicked on the.
When we start having, see, this is just me. When we start having chazanot that's really flowery, when we start having all these wonderful harmonics with a choir that prevents people from participating because they can't sing with this choir, then it actually, I find very distracting spiritually. That's just me.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, Marty.
I hope I didn't cause that to go on. I was copying the link, so my apologies.
It's okay.
I don't know. Sorry. I was going to say, and it was very beautiful. And I guess when I was listening and reading Rabbi Lou's questions over and over during it, I just started crying and realizing, first, just crying because of what it was saying and listening. The second thing, remembering Rabbi Lou, of course. And then feeling like, I guess I'm not alone in these feelings, that others are probably feeling that too, maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Yeah, I think we're all bringing, it definitely causes emotion coming into the season and being able to reflect back and think about some of those questions. Ellen.
I just want to echo what Marcia said. There's something so meaningful to me about having a representative of the congregation do this. And they are truly a role model to me in the way they lead their life and in the way that they lead prayer. It gives me something to aspire to, and it kind of directs me in a way that I may not be so able to direct myself.
Great, thank you. Iran.
It's almost like Hineni is, yes, here I am, but here I am, please guide me.
Right, so there's a part of it's communal and part of it's individual, and then some of it's, both, a little bit of both. Thank you everyone for your participation this morning. We will meet again next Monday. As you saw, this class is sort of on the heels of the Minyan.